So look, we're going to get underway. Thanks everyone for jumping on. I'm sure there'll be a few more that will jump on as well. Apologies for my sort of croaky voice. I've got the remnants of a little bit of flu just on the way back from Devon late last night. So still sort of working on that, but hopefully it won't impact this week. Cold and flu is the answer. Today we've got some amazing guests. Just to introduce Caitlin McAllister, the MD from the Ministry of Sound. You can just say hello, Caitlin.
Hi everyone.
Robert Richardson, who's the Chief Executive of the Institute of Hospitality, hopefully soon to be Chartered Institute of Hospitality, which would be great for the industry. And as many of you know, Sacha Lord, who is the Chair of the Nighttime Industries Association. So thank you all for jumping on the call. So in really simple terms, the two areas we're sort of going to cover today is we're going to talk a little bit about the football in the last few weeks and the sort of perspective and impacts on sort of sporting and tournament, but then we're going to get into the nitty gritty around new government, first 100 days, and what those impacts would be, where we want to see things moving, and what those sort of first 3 days of announcements really means to everybody. And as you can appreciate, I mean, this is a challenge. As you know, many of you are aware, we weren't expecting announcements to come as quick as they have. Thought that there would be a little bit of a settling in period, but the sentiment and notion definitely feels like we're moving in the right direction, which is positive. As you can understand, there are some anomalies which, you know, just to give you an understanding, myself and Sacha are on a call with HMT this morning arguing the case, and in full knowledge that we may well have to go a different route or different direction to get the answer that we need. But look, I'm going to start the sort of ball rolling with a question to all three, if possible, and I'm probably going to start with yourself, Robert. But look, the last few weeks, there has been this, as you can appreciate, the World Cup has been immense. But the key thing that I really want to sort of resonate on, not only the fact that the economic impact has been really important, but also has it signified the importance of hospitality and nighttime economy to people. A lot of people have talked about the bounce, but can you give us a bit of a view from your members of exactly the sort of resonating feeling from people around how important this has been for them?
I mean, by way of background, the Institute of Hospitality is a professional body for managers. Our members are individuals, not businesses. So when we talk to our members, we actually talk to the people at the proverbial coalface, not potentially PR people who are towing a company line. So we do get some very honest feedback. I think the overriding feeling that's come through is that hospitality became a hub for an awful lot of goodwill and an awful lot of shared experience. Without sounding too romantic about it, people may have watched the football, but it was our pubs and our hotels and our venues that actually brought the communities together. Being a bit more grown up about it during the tournament, so I think it was about 5 weeks, give or take, the hospitality sector in the UK generated just over £150 million in additional sales during the whole of the World Cup. That's great. We'll talk about profit later, but at the moment we're on to revenue. Translated, that means we sold about 30 million more pints than we would in a normal trading period. Now, for our communities, that's a significant economic contribution, but I think it also demonstrates something that's a little bit less easy to measure, and that's our ability to bring people together. I'm forever saying that hospitality is the one industry that's there for the moments that matter, and I think for a great many, the World Cup was one of those moments.
Thanks, Robert. And it resonates with people. And I think the interesting part, and this is where it's so important to have Caitlin on, because Caitlin, obviously running such an iconic business as the Ministry of Sound. Can you give us your take direct from the ministry on how the football affected? And because there were a few people, I know I spoke to Mike Greaves at Sub Club, who said I could have done without the sort of early hours of the morning, sort of Saturday night things which interrupted the sort of club events.
Yeah.
How did How did it sort of?
I think if you're a nightclub, I think just due to the timings of the games, really what they overlapped a lot with our traditional operating hours. So a lot of the time we were, where we'd normally open at 10:30, we were opening at 12, and all you were doing was robbing Peter to pay Paul, to be honest. I think if you were a pub and you could stay open later, so I think for other venues that were able to add additional operating hours on, it was probably more beneficial for them. But for us, we didn't see a massive benefit. You also need to show the games from the very beginning to make sure people know you're a venue that's showing them. And what tends to happen is people don't come out in full force and celebratory mode until later on. So you don't get the full effect until you start to get into that quarter-final, semi-final stage. So you're kind of operating at a loss, running on the hope that England are going to get through and you're going to continue that momentum. So I think personally for us, it was fine. We showed all the games, but I wouldn't say it had a huge impact on us. And obviously there's quite a lot of infrastructure we need to hire in as well. We had to hire in a whole bunch of additional screens to make this work as well. And we activated on site with various things. So I think it probably just about washed its face for us, if I'm being honest.
And how did you find it? I mean, licensing wise, not so much of an issue, but I'm going to get because of the late license. But
yeah, I think licensing wise for us, totally fine. We've got a 24-hour license. I think what was probably challenging for a lot of people, and I think what's surprising is we always knew these games were going to be at odd times. It wasn't a surprise. So probably having something earlier on that was set out so licensed venues know that if they can operate until the final whistle, like what's the plan going to be, so that we weren't all scrabbling at the last minute to find out what happened. Didn't impact us. We can operate whenever. But I think for other venues where there was that uncertainty, and there was that one game in particular where it was will it, won't it, can we not, comms were going out. But if there'd been a blanket rule in advance to see how venues could operate during the World Cup, I think that would have allowed people to plan better, rota, get stock. Also, getting stock deliveries during the World Cup was really difficult. Suddenly you're like, we need kegs and kegs and kegs of beer, and everyone's in the same boat. So I think, to me, it's a bit surprising that there wasn't a rule ready to go before the World Cup for venues. I think that could have really helped take the pressure off these kind of last minute turnarounds and a lot of uncertainty. And also helped us just like marketing comms as well.
I think one of the things, I mean, we were arguing blue in the face, and what was happening is we started on the Monday arguing, got a call on the Thursday for an announcement on the Friday, and it just seemed to be giving us 24 hours notice.
Everyone's, it's like the World Cup's, we've all known it's been happening forever. And we've all known that because of it happening in the States, that the times were going to be slightly odd for us. So, I feel like that decision could have been made months in advance.
Yeah. I mean,
there was no requirement for that to be so last minute.
Well, I had some strong debates with the Met over it, because they phoned me and they were asking me to predict how much of an uplift there'd be with the licensing hours, the sort of curfew being removed. And we were trying to estimate with the head of central licensing exactly what it looked like. And when I phoned him on the Tuesday, he went, "Oh, it was a whitewash. There was loads more than you predicted." And when I spoke to everyone else, they went, "No, there wasn't." So it was almost, it's another one of these sort of regenerative. And
that exercise could have been done. They could have, it was, for me, I'm just like, this wasn't a surprise. It wasn't like,
I know.
This thing happening that requires later operating times.
And I agree. Sash, what's your view on how the football impacted, particularly for Manchester being such a heavy football city?
Well, the best football city. But, I think firstly, I've just got to say, I will totally agree with Caitlin on those points. I mean, it just showed how little Starmer and his team understood about the sector. Now, how can you, within 2 days' notice, get extra beer in and staff it up? And Caitlin's right, advertise it. You simply couldn't. So thank God he's gone. But in terms of Manchester, not many places stayed open actually for the late ones. I was quite surprised. The ones that did, the handful that did, I think there were 5 or 6 were extremely busy. But yeah, not many at all. And it's great for those pubs but NTIA represent the whole sector, don't we, Mike? And it wiped out restaurant trade during the World Cup. Absolutely wiped it out. So yeah, it's some of the sector did most definitely benefit, some didn't. Spend per head wasn't as high as people were expecting during the games. Don't know why that was. And I think one thing that if you're a pub or even a nightclub and you can bring in screens and stuff like that, then I think the World Cup's great. And I don't know how you stop this. I think operators who were there week in, week out should be able to benefit off things like the World Cup. I'm not a massive fan of these companies that roll in for a 3-week period, set up a temporary, World Cup fan zone and then bugger off again, because they're soaking up the audience that the regular operators should be getting. And we saw it in Manchester. It was a London operator actually came up and they were doing 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 tickets. I'd rather they went out in independence.
I think just on that point, Sacha, the spend per head, I think, I can only look at our venue, then I popped in to see what some people around us were doing. Because of the way venues are laid out and then the kind of temporary screens that were bought in, people kind of found a spot, anchored themselves to it, and then didn't move. So if you're in a pub or a traditional space that's like made for consuming sports on television, then you can get served, right? But if you're in a venue that's jam-packed, you've got a good seat, or you've got a seat where you've got a standing point where you've got a good sight line, you're not going to the bar. And then even at half time or during the hydration breaks, people were like, I've got my space. And so they were only having 1 or 2 drinks. It wasn't like being in, the pub watching a normal football game where people are up and down and, it just, I really noticed that people found somewhere, stood there and then nursed their drink, or maybe they'd have a mate that would go to the bar, come back and try and get their way through again. But I think because they were in venues that aren't built for this, it just, like, we were showing it in our main room. We don't even have a bar in there. We put a pop-up one, but it was fine. But the spend per head was completely underwhelming.
I used to have this, Caitlin, with Part Life, when the headline act was on, found your spot, and that's, you don't want to move. So to get around that, I used to send hawkers in, with the backpacks on.
With the backpacks, yeah. It's like that's why American football stadiums are so good. And when you look at places like Tottenham, that's been designed on that kind of model, they're made so people can consume what they're watching and still consume food and drink. But because we were all, square peg, round hole, making our venues work to show football, they're not set up, like we're set up for like high volume bars, not that kind of service. I think the times as well, like, didn't help. But I think that the big reason for the spend per head is people are just there and not moving.
Yeah. Thanks, Caitlin. Robert, just a quick one. We mentioned the bounce, which I think, the amount of the media that I did over the couple of days when the release came out on the Friday, a lot of people were talking about the bounce, the rekindling of relationship particularly with pubs and music venues, etc. And Caitlin will probably bring you into this as well. I think everyone realised that there wasn't a load of money to make of it, because what you gained in the football, you probably lost in other areas, because people have only got so much money in their pocket. But have you spoke to many of the people or members from IOH that have suggested that there's been a sort of bounce off the back of the World Cup and people sort of coming back out a little bit more, or is that not the case?
It's by and large, we should be wary of a lot of the headlines that come out. Some venues, yes, they've seen a little bit of a pickup post the World Cup, but the rule of thumb is no, they haven't. I think Sacha said it quite well a few minutes ago, whereas pubs did see a bit of a bounce, restaurants when operating hours clashed with matches went backwards. Whereas footfall in pubs was up by more than 200% during the World Cup, average spend was down, and footfall returned to more or less static where it was before at the end of the tournament. And I think the biggest challenge is we've overtaxed, we've raised the cost of living. I say we, this is the previous government. We've made it really hard to square the circle just paying your bills, let alone having money to go out on a night out. I was in London during one of the matches, and I was surprised how empty the pubs and bars were. When I got home in South Kent, I walked through town, and again, it was really, really quiet, because as much as people want to go and support teams and enjoy the nightlife, if the money's there, if the money's not there, the money's not there. We talk about the fact that we had an additional £150 million in pub and bar sales during the football. We absolutely did. 30 million additional pints sold. We absolutely did. Great headlines. When you actually drill down on the detail, 30 million pints in a world where you get 12 pence profit on a pint of beer if you're lucky, means the average pub or bar made just £80 profit on that during the whole of the World Cup. And to put that into context, that's what, 6 hours on the national living wage, or a third of a ticket from Manchester to London on the train. It's a huge amount of graft and effort for very, very little return, and that just exacerbates the problem.
Thanks, Robert. I mean, one thing I think is quite important. I mean, there was a lot of, and cost aside, one of the things that we sort of discuss is whether the profile of people coming to watch sport had changed with the popularity of women's football, etc. And this is something for Caitlin and Sacha, really. Caitlin, you obviously first-hand experience of the ministry. Did you see the sort of dynamic of a sort of better spread of sort of gender across the people coming to watch, or was it still quite heavily sort of male orientated in terms of people coming in? And lastly, was there a lot of people who tagged events on to what was happening? So going through to the early out, still doing the events, but preparing for it so that you went on later to try and retain as many people as possible, or did people just leave after the football?
So I think in terms of the split of demographic, I definitely think it was more equal than normal. I think what's nice about things like the World Cup is it kind of is just like, I'm not a big football fan, I'm also Scottish, so we peak early. It's just like, it's nice, it's sunny, everyone wants to go out, it's a nice group thing to do. So I think, and there's like there's a nice solidarity about rooting for your team. So I think like I found generally that people were really well behaved, they were respectful of the venue, it was fun. If they jumped on a table and they were thrown back, like fine, whatever, like it's not hooligan behavior. So I found generally that was all okay. In terms of, we had DJs on to kind of amp them up and then for half time and stuff, but because I think all bar 2 of the events for us, they all ran into club nights. We were literally like closed, like football fans coming out one exit, and we had people coming into the club on the other. So we were delaying the door, which actually for me would have probably been better not, but we wanted to be shown the football. So people didn't wait, and sometimes we detained people to stay in, but we were still running nights that are very specific to what's on at ministry, as opposed to trying to keep people in for a football crowd. I think when it also very much depends on the outcome as well, doesn't it? Like at the last England game, I've never seen a dispersal quite as quickly as that in my life. So
yeah,
people weren't massively hanging because it was late as well. It wasn't like the game was finishing at 10 o'clock and people could get another couple of hours drinking up time. It was late on.
Yeah. Just out of interest, just for you, Caitlin and Robert, and then I'll move on to Sacha, did people come for the other matches outside of the domestic
Yeah, we had a few. I mean, we tapped into games that we've got good customer base for. So like we have a lot of French customers at ministry, and we showed the France games. So I think like where we knew that we had we had that audience database, and also we work with like French promoters, like Elephant Castle, where ministry has got a huge Latin American audience, and like we do quite a lot of like Latin tech house. So we already have those audience databases. So where we knew we could tap into it, we showed them. But for other games, not so much. I think you need to. It's not worth us opening for them.
Thanks, Caitlin. Just a quick, Sacha, so just moving on to you. I mean, you mentioned some of these sort of roll in, roll out sort of promoters. I mean, one of the things everyone talks about is that late night trading patterns and the atmosphere, because obviously we've moved to an earlier sort of daytime, evening, nighttime economy. What did you see in terms of the impact of the way people traded? Did it just completely sort of take away from certain nights, or what was the sort of feedback in terms of those trading patterns that skewed people coming to watch the football? Or do you think there were just two different audiences coming out over that trading period? Oh, you're on mute, mate.
Sorry. Yeah, just two different audiences altogether. I mean, for the early games, we noticed that most people were just buying from the supermarket, watching them at home. But obviously, the more we progressed, there was more and more excitement that started to creep in. And I have to say, you know, it was refreshing to see a much, you know, the gender gap is definitely getting closer and closer. And I'd say even quite family orientated as well. You know, I did see, you know, you saw sons and daughters with the mums and dads, which was quite nice. Certainly for the earlier games, not the ones in the early hours of the morning. But yeah, it was definitely two different types of demographics going out, Mike. Mike, you're on mute.
I'm copying you, mate. The one of the things, and this for Robert, obviously from a people perspective, it you know, I was trying to explain this to the Home Office when they released the announcement of I said there's a lot of people who have already planned to go and watch the football who are not at work, so being dragged into extend, and I think we saw about 25% more venues take it up, but also the length of hours that people had to operate, given the fact that obviously the previous government had rinsed the backside out of young people working. And were there any particular pinch points that you saw or frustrations from operators, particularly around these sort of the shift in licensing, which meant they had to move very quickly, or did people just forgive the position that they're just not going to be able to do it as quick as they needed to?
There are a lot of venues, certainly member venues we've spoken to, that were hugely frustrated with how late in the day the announcement came from government. I mean, to be honest, I don't think I'm telling anyone on this call anything they don't know, but it made it so tough to forward plan, because at a business level, you're actually playing with people's livelihood. You're turning around and saying, I can't rotor you on now, but I'm probably going to want to if Keir Starmer does this. And it's it's not a fair position for people to be in. Obviously the football was on particularly odd hours this time, and we saw a lot of businesses having to look at what do they do for staff safety. So they had to lay on additional transport. There's certain areas, certainly provincially, where you can't rely on buses. So I have members that are actually renting people carriers and becoming bus services, which is hugely expensive. I mean, fair play to them, really good that they've done it. The challenge I think everyone had, I spoke a few minutes ago about how little the cash profit was on what was a very busy trading period, but you're having to bring in additional staff at a time where we've got 91,000 vacancies in hospitality, led by the fact that recruiting people under 25 or under 21 is prohibitively expensive. You've got the challenges with last minute beer deliveries because you don't know that you could trade. You've now got to worry about increased staff welfare. If someone's going to be, you know, the final didn't really finish at about midnight. By the time people have filtered out the pub and you've cleaned down, you're into 1, 2 in the morning. How are you going to get people home? So there was a lot of indecision, a lack of leadership, and a huge cost burden. It really was the perfect storm for disaster. And a lot of businesses, they met that well, to be fair, because equally, if I don't trade, if I don't, you know, keep my client base happy, certainly in less affluent or busy areas, do you think you're going to have a problem? Because people may migrate elsewhere, or you'll really push people to buying wine from the supermarkets and watching the football at home. So I don't really envy a lot of operators during that period, because it was really tough at the worst possible time.
Thanks, Robert. I mean, one of the things, and I'm really interested just to hear to cap this off before we get into the new government and Andy Burnham's first sort of almost first week, is licensing. You know, what are your views? And Caitlin, if I can come to you first, what's your view? Do you think that we should just carte blanche look at all of these tournaments as opportunities harness, trade over and above so that we can plan effectively. Is that something that you would support?
Absolutely. I think, as I said earlier, this tournament wasn't a surprise. There'll be lots more like it, whether that's, and there's lots of opportunities across lots of sporting events, whether that's a Super Bowl or a Wimbledon or a Rugby World Cup or, whatever's going on. And these take place in all different parts of the world. And I think we know about them in advance. It's very easy to apply blanket licensing laws that allow people to operate within that time frame, to allow people to do that far in advance, for them to have to apply for attends to do that, because also on the flip side, if everyone's applying for that, there's no way that local authorities are going to be able to review in time. And I think if people are good operators normally, then why would we not allow them to do that? And especially if it's a nationwide kind of approach. And I think those upfront early comms are really, really important for people's planning.
Thanks, Caitlin. I think the interesting one is that the police were quite quick out the blocks, highlighting that there'd been something like, I think it was about 1,700 initial incidents off the back of the sort of matches, particularly the Argentina match, etc. What they didn't specify, as usual, is where they took place and what time they took place, etc. So we're always bound by these stats that are molded to sort of impact where we are, and particularly those stats were framed to ensure that decision making was considered at a greater sort of level, given the fact that there were so many accidents. I mean,
whether that game finished at 9 p.m. or 1 a.m., that's not going to change the impact of the fact that the licensing times don't correlate with that behaviour, and they don't correlate with the police that's required. Because if you have 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 people extra out, whether that's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 9 o'clock at night, or 2 in the morning, those extra people are on the streets, and that needs to be resourced. So they can still make in advance decisions around licensing, and that can actually allow them to also pre-plan their resource. So I think everyone benefits from that. So I don't, I don't think that's there will, with more people out, there will be more issues. Where you have a city, especially cities where you've got lots of different people of different nationalities, there's bound to be some things happen. That is not related to time. I personally don't believe.
Yeah, and I think this whole proportionality thing comes in. I mean, if you've got 1 million people out and you've got 1% of people who are acting, then, if you only talk about the number rather than the proportion, then it sort of completely sort of places it in a very different sort of framing. But Sash, what are your thoughts? And I mean, we're constantly sort of hit by, whether it's spiking or whether it's, policing stats. We need to really get a bit of a handle on these stats and the way that they're framed, particularly in the public domain, which tends to sort of shoot a sort of PR position that hinders further licensing opportunities. What are your views on it?
Well, yeah, ever since I started 32 years ago, every time I've applied for a license, it always feels like you're automatically on the naughty step. And I do think, I am confident now we're going to see change in approach and attitude with the new leader that took office last week. He's already started to talk about live music venues and things. We haven't had that for a long, long time. So, we're getting acknowledged. But and it's not a north-south divide thing, but I think the way the Met approached some of the stats in London are frankly ridiculous. They seem so anti-nightlife to me. They were the ones in Westminster that said Greggs couldn't sell a hot sausage roll because of crime and disorder. I mean, who in the right mind thinks a hot sausage roll is going to create crime and disorder? But that's what they said. So I think we need to see now better acknowledgements of, I think restaurants, pubs are always nice for politicians to talk about in live music venues. But for me specifically now, we have to see nightclubs coming more into the fold and speaking more about nightclubs. Because ultimately, if you take away Ministry or take away Warehouse Budget, all those pre-bars and venues will probably die beforehand. We are the final rung of the ladder on a night out. but you'll jump in a taxi first, or you'll get a bus. You might go for a bite to eat. You might buy a new outfit for the event. You might go to a pub or a bar first, and then you end up at a nightclub. And then after that, you go to a takeaway and you get a taxi home. So there's a whole ecology around that. And I think we have to, us combined, have to play a much more important role in making the new leadership understand that.
Thanks, Sash. And look, I mean, it's a great segue into it. I mean, new government's first 100 days, I think everyone was sort of focused on. I wasn't expecting the level of announcements that came out initially with regard to the buses, with regard to energy, with regard to business rates. As you can appreciate, devil's always in the detail, but the information is good. I mean, you worked with Andy in Greater Manchester. You know him very well. What do you think? I mean, does he understand the economics, the cultural and community value of hospitality and nighttime economy? I mean, I've seen his Instagram posts, which first time I've ever seen a prime minister actually talk in the context of going out for a pint, DJing and listening to live music. I mean, it kind of makes you feel like there is a little bit of a direction of travel change.
He absolutely gets the importance of it, Mike. We only 2 weeks ago I was at his office in Makerfield, because obviously he's the MP for Makerfield as well, and he was asking me all the right questions. All his kids have worked in hospitality. His daughter worked in Revolution in Liverpool, so he's always asking me questions about, what do you think about looking after stuff like this, or getting the night buses home and things. So I think we're going to see a real emphasis on what is the 5th biggest industry in the UK and the 3rd largest employer. And I actually think it's a really exciting time. I mean, last week he made so many announcements, and I know he got mocked on, VAT on utility bills. People say, well, 45 quid, big deal. But yeah, go into Makerfield and knock on a door and say to a family there, what does 45 quid mean to you? It's a week shopping for them. So, and again, the bus people were taking the piss out of capping bus fare at 2 quid. Actually, if you work 9 to 5 and get a bus there and back to work, it's going to save you 500 quid. So all these things are going to make a huge difference. And I am excited. And I got it so wrong with Starmer and Rachel Reeves when she said she was the Chancellor of Business and Growth. She couldn't have been further from the truth. Our NI increase was so damaging for this sector. It really was. And we're seeing reports this morning about how many 18 to 24-year-olds are out of work and there's no longer Saturday jobs available. And that is simply because of the NI increase. I put it firmly down at that. The business rates increase was catastrophic, ill thought through. And, she just didn't get us at all. She put us right at the end of the queue. Well, I think now we are going to be close to the front of the queue.
Thanks, Sash. And I'm just going to look, immediate economic support is what a lot of people are talking about. And I think some people have highlighted the fact that we can't wait until next April with regard to the business rate side. But I think everyone knows, and definitely the conversations we've had and those conversations in those sort of circles is, look, the intimation is important. The fact that there are noises in a certain direction, and this is not the end of it. There's more to come. Even on HMT's call this morning, there's more to come. There's more conversations to be had. We're happy to work with you. Definitely is a different conversation with the HMT that is very sort of full stop. Caitlin, I'm really interested to see, the government's proposed business rates relief. I know it excludes sort of nightclubs, but what's the sentiment in terms of you as a business and where Burnham has started over the course of the less than a week? Is it giving you a feeling of confidence that he is considering the sector?
Well, if it includes nightclubs. So, I think the thing is, you touched on it earlier, Sacha, like nightclubs are often immediately seen as bad. People just, nightclubs, like that's where people misbehave or that causes antisocial behavior. And it's like, well, no, that's just not the case. And they need to move away from seeing nightclubs as a bad thing. I think point one, like the perception of what late night industry is, needs to change, and they need to be seen as important parts of communities, areas, culture. That ecosystem is so important. You do all these things before a night out, the taxi, the drinks, the jobs it creates, from freelance lighting techs to, you know, your DJs, and DJs have agents and manage, like there's a whole world that exists around this that is just so much bigger than anyone realizes. And I think, you know, if nightclubs can get included in the business rates relief, it's a great start. It kind of, it balances out where they went up before, so it kind of takes us back to that position. But I think there's, you know, the NI, as you said, was crippling. The threshold change, you know, we need to look at VAT. Like there's so many things that could have, I think there's the costs on actual businesses, there's the cost of living. And I do believe that if people have an extra 40 quid in their pocket, sometimes they will choose to spend that on a nightclub ticket, or they will go down to, they'll go to a restaurant and they'll eat out one night instead of, like, I do believe that people want to be happy and they want to enjoy their life, you know? So I wouldn't underestimate how these small things can make a big impact. So, you know, it's kind of threefold. There's actual cost on businesses, and therefore, like, what costs we can pass on to our customers that we don't want to have to, because there is a cap on what you can charge them before you just put people off. There's then actually controlling costs, so people have got a bit more money in their back pocket. And then there's, you know, the things that we need to do to support nightlife in terms of transport. And actually, if you try and eat food late at night in London after a nightclub, you're slim pickings. You know, that 10, 15 years ago, you might have actually been able to go out and have a meal at 4 a.m. somewhere. There was places you could go and do that. So I think it's also supporting businesses to be able to get late night refreshment licenses. Like there's all these things, and even like a 20% shift in each of them will make big waves for the overall industry.
I think the interesting part, I mean, we did a survey a while back, and completely right, the cost of operating and the cost of daily living are the two sort of pressure points. People are going out less frequently, their spend is reduced, and their dwell time, or the time they spend out, is difficult. I mean, what we are seeing is almost not a revolution, but this thing where people are staying at home until late, going out for short bursts and then coming back, or they're just drinking long drinks throughout the day if they're sat in the beer garden, etc. Robert, and I know I've done this the other way around compared to where we are, but how is that cost of living changing how often people go out, and when they go out, how much they spend when they are there? I mean, one of the things that we discussed is the economics being the primary issue, but transport and safety also being two very clear issues influencing whether people are going out or not. What's your view or feedback from people that you're talking to in the industry?
People are being a lot more choosy, and that's purely born out of the money they've got in their pocket. You know, you might want a couple of beers after work on Friday night, but actually you're going to save that cash because you've got a wedding to go to tomorrow. People are struggling. We've raised every imaginable cost under the previous administration, and life is very, very hard. I know I sound like a pawn of doom, but I think that's fair. Conversely, what have we got going for us? We are the experience industry. So we've seen a marked consumer shift over the last 2 years where people have stopped acquiring things and started to acquire experiences. So they're more likely to look at a night out in ministry, or a nice meal out, or a hotel stay in somewhere memorable, to actually have that photo and that memory versus, you know, something nice in their house. And I think that's the one thing we probably got going for us above any other industry. But in terms of consumer habits, as we've seen with the football, people are coming in literally at the start of the match, leaving at the end, not staying before or after. Or if you're going for a wedding, you know, you'll turn up to your hotel on the morning of the wedding and go the very next day instead of making a few days out of it. Not because you're too busy or because there's another reason, but you have to make the money stretch. And I think as we look to bring down the cost of living, so £2 bus fare caps, that's a great help. Money off of energy bills, etc. It will have a benefit on everyone. You know, whether that benefit is small or large depends on your personal circumstance. But as we continue to roll out more and more meaningful ways to put more money in people's pockets, I think the cumulative impact will be substantial, and that hopefully will start pushing people's spending habits back to a little bit more time in a hospitality venue, in a hotel, in a nightclub.
Thanks, Robert. Sacha, this one's for you. And I know we've had lots of discussions on this. First 100 days, cost of operating crisis in the industry. What are the next 3 announcements which will change the pathway for the new PM? What 3 things would you like to see rolled out that he can hang his hat on that are going to change the level of confidence with him as in his tenure?
Well, number 1 would clearly be a VAT reduction. I think that's the one ask that all of us combined would hope for. And I think Tom Kerridge has done a really good job on this, actually, bringing it into the public to talk about. I can't see it going as low as 10%, if I'm being completely honest. But he did commit to a VAT reduction back at the NTIA conference in February in Liverpool, as did Angela Rayner, actually. So we need to keep him held to that, don't we? And, you know, again, we were talking about it when I met him 2 weeks ago. So it's, you know, he hasn't forgotten about that. The other thing as well I'd like to see is reversal of the national insurance increase. I think we're all completely blindsided by that. And the third thing, which he has made an effort with this, but I think he needs to go further, the business rates reduction. It has to be applied for all hospitality and not just limited.
Yeah, no, 100%. It was interesting. I was with the DCMS minister, Ian Murray, a couple of weeks back, and I was sat in a room with a group of operators that we brought together with John Collins from Live, and we were having a debate, and we'd all turn around and said, look, the best way to deal with this is a VAT cut. And he said, well, is there any other way of doing something else other than something fiscal? And I said, so what you're telling us is you want us to trade out of this horrendous position where we're onerously, you know, overtaxed. And without saying yes, it was very much a yes. And Caitlin, you were in a meeting with DCMS where we were sort of sat around the table and giving civil servants a bit of a hard time, but a good opportunity to sort of push. So I think, you know, there is definitely a shift in narrative and rhetoric from, you know, trade out of this to we recognize that the cost of daily living is way too high. As we reduce that, they will spend more on some of the luxury items, if we call ourselves luxury, the social and cultural economy. And then the other part is obviously the cost of daily living, the cost of operating being reduced. We may well actually start to grow and invest in what we're doing and potentially expand, which I think is vitally important. One of the big things I would say, and I'm going to say it like this, and I hope you understand this. One of the things that both Sacha and Andy were great at is something called the Manchester halo effect, I call it. Talking in the context of business being good and the city wanting to do business. How much, and this is one for Sacha, I suppose, and it's hard to answer because you were part of that movement, but I always found that the positive energy from Manchester made it a city that wanted to do business. And that was a really important part of not just the rhetoric, but the narrative that presented Manchester as a really strong option. How much do you think Andy can bring of that energy to the central government office moving forward?
I think I am clearly biased, but I think on the back of last week's 5 or 6 announcements, I think it has given hope actually to what's about to come. And I've even got mates now who wouldn't give Andy their vote. They're Tories or Lib Dems, but they're saying to me in private, actually, we really hope he succeeds because the country is so screwed at the moment that we need him to succeed. We can't have another failure. I think people are getting behind him, and he was talking about making a difference to every single postcode in the UK, and I think he's started off well with that.
Thanks, Sash. So look, I think the one thing that and I'm conscious of time because we've got a bit of a hard thing, and Ian, I know you've got a question, just bear with us 2 minutes. I just want to get a closing sort of piece from each of the sort of panelists. Caitlin, 2 minutes with Andy Burnham.
I mean, I think that halo effect point you made there is super key. I think there is a complete desire from people to go out and have fun, whether that's a restaurant, a pub, a nightclub, a festival, whatever that is. Whilst it is grim and it is expensive and the margins are tighter than ever, I am still seeing 5,000 people walk through our doors on a weekly basis. So people want to go out. They need it to be accessible, they need it to be safe, they need to be cost effective. And, you know, that happens in a number of ways. So it's not about nightlife dying. It's not about kids drinking less. These are things that are happening and trends are changing and people go out a wee bit earlier and they're not staying out till 6 in the morning now. They're wrapping up their night at 3, 4. So there are changes, but the desire to go out and have fun and listen to music and discover new talent and meet new people and be humanly connected is absolutely there. Like it's a need that people have. So I think if we identify that as a thing that we as society just need, and we stop making nightlife and nighttime economy the villain, you know, a point one, I think there needs that, for me, the perspective needs to shift. And then, you know, there needs to be some give and take in the help that can be given and you know, the relief from people. And that needs to come from both the business end, and then we need to help find ways to give people a little bit more money to go out and do that fun stuff.
I think one of the things that we talked about is we talk about risk, we talk about economics, but we never talk about health capital. You know, how much does the social and cultural economy, in terms of people's well-being, mental health, etc.
People need social connection. Also, like, you know, if I think about this industry, I would say 50% of the deals I've done in my career have happened in bars, clubs, pubs, festivals. Like, they happen because people are all connected and they're there. You know, we all do business in our places of work, and I've met some of the most amazing people in these spaces. So, you know, these spaces are more than just places for people to go and get pissed. And I think the sooner there's that realization that they hold a lot for people's mental health, escapism. Like, you know, there's a stat about doing the steps you'll do on the dance floor, like how good that is for you compared to like going a walk. Like, there's lots of reasons to go and consume nightlife, whether that's in live music or a nightclub or whatever.
Thanks, Kate. Robert, 2 minutes for Mr. Burnham. What are you saying?
I think, Andy talks an awful lot about hope, and that's right, but hope starts in your community. So is your community somewhere that you can grow and develop and thrive and have a career, have a good hospitality life, have places to go and meet people? And in order for hospitality to provide those jobs and provide those experiences, we need to be left to do it. I think he's got a huge job undoing the damage of the previous government, certainly in terms of the cost of doing business. But everything I've seen so far, and bearing in mind it is day one of his second week, so everything I've seen in that short space of time has been really promising. I think the biggest challenge hospitality has, full stop, is despite the fact we are a huge employer, we contribute £40 billion a year to UK PLC, we're not recognised as an industry. We're not formally recognised by government, and until we have that formal recognition, we just can't have that value, because with all respect to Andy, administrations do change, whereas formal recognition is forever. So my ask of him would be to give our industry the formal recognition that we absolutely deserve.
Thanks. Thank you, Robert. And I think the key word here is he's value us. Which I think is important. Sash, slightly different question to you. What have you told him instead of what I'm telling him?
Do you know what? I actually told him to just not change, be true to himself. And I think he's coming across already like that. He's coming across quite approachable. I think his social media team is phenomenal. I think they're on fire with it, you know, and I know TikTok's not everyone's favorite thing, but to engage with certainly young people, it's the best way of doing it. You know, even the pub snap thing he did on Friday night with John Healy, I thought it was great. I thought it was a really good way of engaging with people. So, I hopeful. I'm excited. I'll be honest, I still find it really weird, the fact that he's the PM. But yeah, that's the way it is.
No. Thanks, Sash. Look, we've got 3 people who just want a question. We've probably only got room for about 3 questions if everyone's all right for it. Ian, can we could keep them quite succinct question-wise? That would be great.
Okay, well, I totally agree with everything that everybody said about social cohesion, the ability of our industry, nighttime, to bring people together, to create that joy. So for me, and Robert, you mentioned it about hope, and hope of having a practical sense. Is it time for us as an industry, if we want to keep Andy, and I confess to being a slightly right of centre old gammon, yeah, but what I will say is he has always impressed me with that energy, that desire. So is it time, if you want to keep him, for us to ask not what Andy can do for us, but what we can do for Andy to help him get through this initial phase?
Ian, thanks, Ian, and that was a really good question. Actually, I was waiting for a longer question, but I love you for the shortened version. Look, I think the one thing I would say to you is we are already getting the sense that the conversation around policy being designed with the industry, not for the industry, is the way things are moving forward. And that's a huge difference in terms of the approach from previous government. As you can appreciate, what we were doing is just landing with a policy that had limited input from very refined people, which didn't really encompass the broader sector. So I think that's already there. Sash, have you got anything you want to add to that?
Well, you know, it's not in the public domain, but yourself, Mike, and Philip Colvin, KC, who's probably most eminent KC in hospitality, have produced a superb 43-page document that Andy now has. And it is exactly asking that question, you know, what can we do to support you as the Prime Minister?
And Sacha was involved in that as well. Although it's been a really good journey, and there's lots to come. So there's some exciting things on the table at the moment. But exactly as you frame it, Ian, something that he is open to listening. So Thomas, can I bring you in, mate?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, got you, mate. Yeah.
Fantastic. This is a question to Sacha, if that's all right. So I'm a worker in the hospitality industry in Manchester. And as a supporter of the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter, you've invited businesses across Manchester to join in order to protect workers and improve business relations. One of the businesses that has signed up to the charter is the Kimpton Clock Tower Hotel. Workers there are currently on strike for the first time ever in Manchester. The City Council have since sent a letter to bosses at the Kimpton requesting them to listen to the workers and requesting in their request for recognition with Unite Hospitality in line with the GMCA Good Employment Charter. Workers across the city and beyond have no voice currently in our industry. Yet when work is organised with Unite Hospitality, we've seen them win full-time contracts, better conditions, and back pay of up to £3,000 per person to equalise minimum wages for age. We've also seen successes when organising around the Get Me Home Safe campaign, as workers have won paid taxis to and from their workplaces at venues like the Kimpton. But some businesses, even those signed up to the GMCA charter, fail to provide workers with fair conditions unless Unite Hospitality has been involved. We've already seen 2 elected union reps sacked at the Kimpton, with a 3rd we expect to be sacked this week. So will you commit to asking the Kimpton to return to the negotiating table, and what steps will you take to ensure that Unite Hospitality and hospitality workers, those that run the nighttime economy, have a voice in this city?
Thomas, it sounds like you prepared that, Thomas.
Yeah.
Is there any chance you can send us a written version?
Yeah.
It won't surprise you, Thomas, but I'm obviously on the side of the workers there, and I have been watching it and following it. And even only yesterday, there was an article, I think, in the Evening News. And I've helped, I think it's Brian, isn't it, at Hospitality Unite. I've helped him in the past. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, to answer your question, I think it's absolutely imperative not only do the Kimpton hotels sit down with the workers, but they also give them the freedom as well. And if they want to join a trade union, then join a trade union. I just think it's completely unacceptable the way people are being treated at the moment, especially at the Kimpton.
Thanks, Thomas, and thanks, Sacha, for and just the last one, Lyle.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for hosting this. Thanks, Caitlin, Sacha, Robert, for an interesting discussion. It's more of an observation, which is we have obviously got the Euros coming up in the UK in 2028. 7 UK cities hosting minimum of 4 games each, plus Dublin and the Republic of Ireland. I'm hoping this is the same for other cities in the UK, but in a rare show of progress, Birmingham City Council have got a working group together, and I'm representing the nighttime economy on that. It's a really interesting opportunity to take some of the learnings from the World Cup and other big sporting events, mega events, particularly when it comes to hosting fan zones, which is going to be a big challenge for us, even as a major city. Each city will have different teams as part of the UEFA offer. So there's a potentially up to, depending on how many fans travel for each game, 240,000 extra people in the city for June to July 2028. So really, it's just a kind of an observation to take, some of the more salient points, I guess, and the NTIA can lead on this in how we ensure that, if you excuse the pun, cities are match fit for for that tournament. And obviously a lot of it is going to be signed off well in advance. The bids are in, the cities are confirmed, the games will be revealed soon. So I guess it's a kind of popping it on your radar now if you are in one of those cities that's hosting.
So just to give you a bit of an overview, Lyle, we're already in discussion with the Home Office. Now we've got a new minister in place, particularly the senior civil servants, about having a conversation around the broad brush licensing position so that we don't come up with the same issues. Well, it took an inordinate amount of time for me and others to lobby extremely hard to get what we got out of the World Cup because they weren't willing to budge. So look, I completely agree with you. Prep is important, but those conversations are happening. If we get a chance where the civil servants want to get people around the table, then we'll definitely reach out to people who are interested in having that discussion from different regions of the country.
Right. I mean, obviously the opportunity is huge, and UEFA are already driving forward with their project teams in each city. So there's a bit of a trickle down, bottom up, top down approach from all sides.
No,
I would also just add there, I think there'll be a huge difference between, there's obviously learnings from licensing, but I think being host cities, having UEFA fan zones and looking at then that kind of ripple effect that happens on businesses around it, when you've got an influx of tourists and visitors into cities, that should be way, way more positive on all of the host cities, and then the kind of peripheral than the World Cup has been. Like when you're a host, it completely changes. And as long as that planning is done up front, like we spoke about, I imagine that should be a much more.
And there's the rub, Caitlin, is the planning, and hopefully all the cities are kind of leveling up and traveling at the same speed. But there's a lot of work to be done, certainly here.
And hopefully, as pointed out, we can work with local hospitality businesses to help activate those fan zones, so that it's people in the city are benefiting from it and not other people being parachuted in. I think those are the key things, and that's where the economic impact should really be measured, is how it impacts the people who operate daily in that city, and not some big production company that's decided to tender at a multi-city scale, which is often what happens with these things.
I think one of the things just to bring up, so there's two things that are happening at the moment. Definitely with regard to London and the Nightlife Commission, there is conversations already happening about licensing and what that looks like. So So without a doubt, similar to yourself, Lyle, and others, we're having those discussions, but central government with Home Office are definitely very early doors on this. But we've been waiting for the new Home Secretary to be appointed so that we could deal with it. So the coming weeks, I'm hopefully going to have some higher level conversations. So completely agree on the agenda. And if we get an opportunity to bring people together to give a perspective, we'll do that also. All right. Lovely. Well, look, I'm going to, for Lyle, another trigger, just a little bug in here. I think Pat's promoting you. Right, listen everyone, thank you very, very much for your time. Thanks to the panelists, Caitlin, Robert, Sacha, really appreciate your time. Hopefully you get a bit of perspective on what's happening and how football's impacted, but more importantly, the sort of first 100 days of the new regime, which feels, as we said, a little bit of a halo effect. There definitely feels some positive energy. I think everyone I've spoke to says in the light of cautious optimism, I think is the way that we've been framed. And I think it's for Mr. Burnham and his cabinet to turn that key and show what he's done in Manchester from a national frame. So positive position at the moment, but there's still lots to play for. So thank you very much and have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.